Here's a thought experiment, and I want you to actually sit in it. We drop you right now, exactly as you are, into 30,000 BC. Same brain, same instincts, everything you know. No phone, obviously. No Google. Just you, a landscape that does not care about you even slightly, and a group of strangers who already know how to live there. How long do you last, honestly? You'd probably be dead by Friday, not because you're weak. You just have no idea which plants kill you, no idea how to make fire, no idea how to read the ground for the thing that's about to read you as lunch. And here's the part that should sting a little. The people who'd watch you fail, the so-called primitive cavemen, were walking around with brains slightly bigger than yours. Slightly bigger. Sit with that. So this is one of those questions that sounds like a cheap insult and turns out to be a genuinely good one. Were they smarter than you? Stay with me, because by the end of this, the word smart is going to feel a lot slipperier than it does right now. So let's actually live in that first week, the one where it goes wrong. Day one, you're cold, you're hungry, and you're realizing your jeans were a catastrophic clothing choice. You don't know how to make fire. You've seen it in a video. Sure, you've got the general vibe of rubbing sticks together, and you will rub those sticks for about 4 hours and produce nothing but blisters and a quiet sense of betrayal. Night one, you freeze. You haven't even thought about water yet, and you should have, because the clear stream that looks cleanest can be the one carrying the thing that empties you out over 2 days. Day two, you're starving, so you start eating things that look food adjacent. Some berries, a nice green plant, a root you clawed out of the dirt. And here's the thing nobody warns you about the wild. A surprising amount of it is quietly trying to poison you, and the dangerous stuff does not look dangerous. It looks delicious. It looks like the safe one's slightly prettier cousin. The forager beside you wouldn't touch it. They'd clock it the way you clock a scam email. They know this plant, this slope, this season, and the near-identical 110 steps over that'll have you on the ground by sundown. And hunting? Don't even start. You can't outrun anything worth eating. You don't know where the animals drink, or when they move, and the spear you'd improvise wouldn't survive its first honest argument with an actual animal. By Friday, the gap between what you know and what that world demands has simply caught up with you. And not one piece of that was about being stupid. It was about knowing the place. You just didn't. That knowing is the thing worth slowing down on. Because what the forager has isn't a single fact, it's a whole running system. Researchers who study living foraging societies call it ecological intelligence, and the more you look at it, the more absurd it gets that anyone ever filed these people under simple. Start with the plants. We're talking a mental catalog of hundreds of species, sorted by where each one grows, what season it's safe, which part you eat, which part you absolutely don't. No field guide, no labels, just memory, built over years and topped up every single day, then layer tracking on top. You and I look at a patch of dirt and see dirt. A skilled tracker looks at the same patch and reads a paragraph. What animal, how big, how long ago? Which way, walking or running, healthy or hurt? They're not guessing, they're reading, and they push it past the tracks, too. A good hunter reads the animal itself, the set of its ears, the way a whole herd drifts when something's off. The difference between a creature that's relaxed and one that's already quietly decided to bolt. That's a working theory of another mind, run live, with dinner, or a goring writing on whether you read it right, and underneath all of it, a constant background model of where everyone in the group is, who's reliable, who's owed a favor, what the weather's about to do. That's not the absence of intelligence. That's intelligence flat out, on problems where the wrong answer doesn't lower your grade. It ends you. And here's the thing, this isn't just romantic guesswork about noble ancestors. You can actually test pieces of it. When researchers measure how well people from foraging cultures remember exactly where specific food plants were growing, they tend to show strikingly sharp memory for location, better than you'd predict. The kind of recall that only really makes sense if your next meal has always depended on it. The skill tracks the need. Build a life where forgetting where the food is means going hungry, and your memory for where the food is gets very, very good. Build a life where a search bar remembers everything for you, and, well, you know how this ends. You've already forgotten where you left your keys. So, okay, now the skulls, because this is the part that genuinely got me the first time. We all carry this quiet little assumption that human intelligence is a line that only goes up. Cavemen at the bottom, us at the glorious top, steady climb the whole way. Clean story. Also, going by the actual bones, kind of backwards. Anthropologists have been measuring old skulls for well over a century, and when you line up thousands of them across the millennia, you get a result nobody wants printed on a mug. The average human brain has been shrinking, not growing. Shrinking by something like 10% over the last 40,000 years. 10% is not a rounding error. That's a real, visible chunk of brain our ancestors carried that we, somewhere along the line, quietly handed. And if you wanted to land harder, look at the Neanderthals, the literal mascot of dumb caveman. Their brains ran around 500 cubic centimeters on average. Yours is closer to 1,350. They were lugging more brain than you, behind a heavier brow, and they used it for very human things, burying their dead, making tools, sitting around fires, so the neat upward arrow isn't just slightly off. On raw size, it's pointed the wrong way. So what were they running on all that hardware? Take one object. There's a stone tool from deep in the past called a hand axe. It looks like a rock someone got mildly serious with. The simplest thing a human could possibly make, right? You'd bang one out before lunch. Except no. When researchers train modern volunteers to make these properly and scan their brains mid-work, the tool making lights up the same network you use to play the piano, the prefrontal cortex. The planning and working memory machinery. The part of you that holds a whole sequence of moves in mind sees the finished thing inside the raw stone and adjusts every strike off the last one, making the simplest tool as in the brain closer to a musical performance than to smashing a rock. Now stack that beside everything else they hold at once. The plant catalog, the tracking, the social chess of a small group where getting on the wrong side of the wrong person could get you quietly left behind, which back then wasn't a social inconvenience, it was a death sentence. And that social tracking is heavier than it sounds. Your brain comes factory fitted to juggle somewhere around 150 stable relationships at once. Who's up, who's down, who owes who's still quietly furious about something from last spring. A forager ran that entire spreadsheet live, in their head, knowing a misread of the room could land them on the wrong side of the only people keeping them alive. Run a gentler version of the exact same program every time you walk into a family dinner and clock, in about 4 seconds, who isn't speaking to who. That's a pile of demanding mental jobs, all running at once, all the time, with no notes app to lean on, which honestly makes they were primitive sound like something muttered by a species that gets winded assembling furniture. And the memory side is almost hard to believe from where we're sitting. These were cultures with no writing, which means everything that mattered, the routes, the seasons, the stories that secretly encoded which mushroom is a terrible idea, the whole history of the group, all of it had to live in human heads and pass mouth to mouth without losing the load-bearing parts. Think about what that actually demands. A song or a story in a world like that isn't decoration, it's the hard wrap the location of water, the timing of a migration, the warning about a place, inside a tale catchy enough to survive being passed down 100 times, and you've built a working memory system out of nothing but rhythm and repetition. People did that. For tens of thousands of years, the entire operating manual for staying alive was carried intact in voices, no backups. Lose the right person before they handed it on, and a piece of it was simply gone. People crossed enormous distances with no map, no compass, no little blue dot reassuring them they are, in fact, the blue dot. They held the landscape itself in their heads the way you hold the layout of the house you grew up in. Now think about how much of your own remembering you've quietly handed off. Your phone holds your appointments, the birthdays, the route, the recipes, the face of the person whose name you lost 3 seconds after hearing it. We didn't keep those skills sharp because we built something better to hold them, which is wildly convenient and also, when you sit with it, a little exposed. Take the rectangle away for a week and watch how much of your life you genuinely cannot reach from memory. Your ancestor never had a rectangle to take away. The whole thing lived in there. It had to. Now here's where I have to pump the brakes, because I don't want to hand you a clean story when the real one is gloriously messy. Bigger brain does not automatically mean smarter. A whale carries a brain several times the size of yours and is not, as far as anyone can tell, composing symphonies down there. A good chunk of Neanderthal brain was just running a bigger, stronger body and a larger visual system, the basic operations of a heavier animal, not some hidden reserve of genius. So more brain is true. More brain equals more brilliant is a leap and an unearned one. And the shrinking itself is a live fight. A study in 2021 made a splash claiming our brains got smaller shockingly, recently, around 3,000 years ago, and tied it to people living in bigger, more organized societies. Tidy, compelling. Then the very next year, another group reran the numbers and basically said, we don't see that drop. Brain size hasn't meaningfully changed in tens of thousands of years. So the honest answer to when we shrank and why is that the people who do this for a living are still arguing about it. Which I love, because it's the opposite of how this stuff usually gets sold to you. The real version is blurry. We've got skulls and educated guesses, not a clean line on a chart, but the core point survives all of it. The cartoon caveman grunting and dim was never real. And before this curdles into me telling you the ancestors were secret geniuses and you're the family disappointment, let's be fair the other way. Because that's just as true. You're standing on something they never had. Not a bigger brain, a bigger pie. Every generation since has been stacking up discoveries and shoving the stack forward. So the average person today casually uses ideas. Zero. Germs, the engine. The radical notion that washing your hands matters. The sharpest mind of 30,000 BC could not have reached those alone in 10 lifetimes. And here's the genuinely humbling bit. You use all of it and could rebuild almost none of it. Be honest. Right now, could you actually make a phone, smelt the metal, refine the glass into a screen? Most of us couldn't reliably start a fire without a lighter. And yet here we are feeling superior to people who could do it with their hands in a bad night's weather. That's the trick of it. You're not a better machine than your ancestor. You're plugged into 30,000 years of other people's thinking, and you get to start where they stopped. A forager had to be brilliant in person in the moment with their own 2 hands. You get to be fairly ordinary and still ride the accumulated cleverness of everyone who came before you, which is its own kind of superpower, honestly. It's just a borrowed one. So if their brains were big and busy, why did ours maybe drift the other way? Here's the reframe that finally clicked it into place for me. Treat your brain like real estate. It is brutally expensive to run, around 2% of your body weight, and it burns close to a quarter of your energy just idling. Every extra scrap of brain is rent paid daily in calories somebody had to go out into a dangerous world and find. So a big brain only earns its keep if you're using all of it, constantly. Your ancestor was. They had to keep the entire survival manual inside their own skull, because there was nowhere else to put it. No books, no elder a phone call away, no glass rectangle holding every half-remembered fact you've ever met. The knowledge had to live in the head, so the head stayed big. Then slowly, we invented places to keep our minds that weren't our minds. Language you could hand down, stories that smuggled a survival map inside a good tale. Then writing, then groups so large that no single person had to hold all of it, because the group held it between them. And the moment knowledge could live outside your skull stopped needing to be quite so roomy. You moved out of the huge, expensive house into a smaller place with a storage unit down the road. The stuff didn't vanish. You just stopped paying to keep every box in the bedroom with you. One serious idea about our shrinking brains is basically exactly that. We offloaded memory onto each other and onto our tools, and the brain, which is a famous tightwad about energy, gratefully downsized. And this is where it stops being a fact about old skulls and quietly becomes about you. Because if any of that holds, you didn't get dumber, you got fitted to a completely different world. You can't name the plant that would drop you, true, but you can hold a conversation with a stranger on the far side of the planet, pilot a 2-ton machine down a motorway with half your mind on dinner, and move through a city of millions without most of them being a threat, which by Stone Age standards is genuinely unhinged sorcery. Flip it. Drop your forager into your world and they'd go under just as fast as you went under in theirs. They'd stare at a subway map like it was a curse scrawled on the wall. Neither of you is the smart one and the dumb one. Intelligence was never a single number sitting on a shelf waiting to be weighed. It's a fit between a mind and the world it has to survive. Move the world and you move what counts as clever. So picture it one more time. You, exactly as you are, dropped into 30,000 BC gone by Friday. And the people standing over you, the ones we filed under primitive, the ones with the slightly bigger brains and the plant database and the hands that turned rock into precision tools, they wouldn't think you were stupid. They'd think you were strange, soft, weirdly helpless for something fully grown. And they'd be right in their world, just like they'd be lost and helpless in yours. You didn't inherit a worse brain. You inherited a different bargain. They paid in raw, personal, life or death knowledge carried in one head. You pay in a quiet dependence on everyone and everything around you, holding the pieces you no longer carry. Neither one is an upgrade on the other. They're two answers to the same question. How do you survive the world you were handed? And the world is the part that changed, not you. So next time someone calls our ancestors dumb cavemen, you can let it slide. Or you can remember they'd have watched you fumble a fire, felt a little sorry for you, and gone back to reading the dirt. If you like looking at ordinary things from the wrong angle on purpose, you know where the button is. Same world, different lens.